Hey there, my name is Danny Liebrand. I'm the founder of Pest Control SEO, where we grow pest control companies with SEO. Today I am here with Peter Rota. Peter Rota is a well-known guy in the SEO space. He's been in it for over 13 years now, since 2011. He is a senior SEO, or technically a senior technical SEO at a billion-dollar company. And he's worked with all different kinds of SEO companies, so it'll definitely be good to hear his vast range of experiences. Mostly I have local SEOs on the show, but I'd like to kind of get an overall grasp of SEO as a whole when, talk about, Google and, where things are heading. Peter also has 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is incredibly impressive. And he's just totally crushing in the SEO space. I think anyone who's familiar on LinkedIn, that they're like somewhat interactive, I see his posts like almost every day. So I've learned a ton from Peter and super excited to have him on the podcast. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Peter.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. Definitely happy to be here and always enjoy talking about SEO. So happy to chat.
For sure, man. So you got into SEO about 13 years ago. Can you tell me how that happened? Like, were you in college or how did that transpire?
Yeah, so I kind of got into it like most people. So I had graduated and was kind of just, I actually went to school for sports management. So I basically had started a sports blog and was kind of like, it wasn't like, I guess you could say it was like Barstool Sports. It wasn't as like crazy, but it was kind of like talking about like some of like the controversial stuff or things like that. And I got to maybe a few months into it and I was basically thinking of like, how can I promote this, and did some research as one does and kept seeing, I put in basically like, I think internet marketing or digital marketing, and they kept mentioning like search engine optimization, and I thought, ooh, that's interesting. And I had some good success kind of just sharing my content on Reddit and just better optimizing my post, and had some good success with that. And then basically thought to possibly pursue it as a career, and had a few internships, and then worked at an agency and kind of just spun into a full-time role. So I'm really happy to be in the field now, and I think it was a good mistake, I guess. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
So I've seen you, this is kind of just a random question. I've seen you work in a ton of different niches, e-com,
Yes.
local, etc. Which one's your favorite to work in?
Ooh, I'd probably say, I really like e-commerce, but I think local is pretty fun too, because you really need to be on your toes and just be like, always constantly learning. I feel like local SEO is like, I made a post a while back. You probably even saw it. It was like the wild, wild west of SEO,
Yeah.
where it's like, it's just crazy. I think I saw today that now your competitors can report you if you're using like fake reviews. So that's definitely going to be misused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I'm curious, when did you start growing your LinkedIn following? Like, how did that happen?
I think it's been like 3 years now. I remember seen a few people posting, and I kept like saying like I was gonna do it, and then originally I just was like trying to post a few times a week, and then kind of got into a habit. But there was a point where I was posting like 7 days a week and kind of got burnt out, so I'm closer to like 3 or 5. But I think originally my intent was just to kind of improve my personal brand, but it's also definitely helped me. Obviously, I'm on your podcast, so it's worked, but I've gotten on
Yeah.
some podcasts and I've been featured in pretty big publications, and I've done some sponsored posts, and then I've also had some like referral work. So yeah, I think it's really been wonderful, and I think it's super important to like just stand out in SEO, and obviously it can also help pre-sell you and kind of build your expertise, especially when you're trying to sell to clients and agencies, for example. So has
Definitely.
a
No,
good
yeah,
variety
I'm
of
a huge believer in personal
Yeah.
brand. Yeah, no, it's so powerful, and I don't really see why you wouldn't do it unless you're, super camera shy, or, you don't want your name out there for whatever reason. I think it's really a no-brainer, and really the fundamental element of building a business is trust, right? So if we can't have that initial trust in place where people can see you on videos and they're seeing your posts every day, like, these people clearly trust you. I had a call with a guy earlier today, and he said, I absolutely love your podcast, man. I've watched everyone. Now I'm like starting to rewatch them. It's like what more trust is that than that, right? So yeah, I absolutely love building the personal brand aspect. And I'm curious, are you on YouTube? Because I'd love to see some videos from you.
I am not. I do post sometimes videos on LinkedIn, but honestly, my schedule's pretty crazy right now between like I work full-time jobs and I do freelance, and I'm trying to do like LinkedIn posts, and then it's just a lot right now. But
Yeah.
I definitely
Okay, cool.
would love to like repurpose my content, but I'm pretty just swamped at the moment.
Yeah, no, I get that. I still haven't done anything with my personal YouTube channel, and I want to go harder on my agency channel. Like, there's always more to
there's
do
a
in
lot.
SEO and just content creation in general. So, cool. I kind of wanted to ask you this as like a general preface to the podcast before we really get into it. Because, I'm more so like in the pest control space and just, talking to local business owners as a whole. Most of these guys, I hate to say it, but basically know nothing about SEO. So could you give me just like a pretty basic rundown of what SEO is?
I mean, at least when I think of it's essentially you have content on your site and you're kind of wanting to promote your services and making it more valuable and kind of hitting any, I guess, intersection or point where people may be searching. But essentially, it's like any marketing, you're trying to promote it more. So you want to basically be the destination where if someone's putting in like, I don't know, like Boston pest control, you want your website to appear as high as possible. So you primarily do that through at least just creating content that kind of serves a purpose and answers questions, as well as backlinks, which could be seen as a citation. So basically people vouching for your work essentially, which is kind of like a lot of businesses now where they'll get a review and it vouches for their work. So you can think of backlinks for that where it's like someone spoke about you and cited you as a source.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that frame. A good term that I've heard used is like looking at it as votes. So
Yes.
like reviews are votes, the likes that you get on your posts are votes, backlinks are votes. So you just want to get as many good votes because there's also bad votes. People can give you bad backlinks or people can say negative things about you online. So overall, you want to get as many good votes out there as possible for your business, right?
For sure.
Awesome. And can you also explain the difference between just general SEO and then local SEO?
I mean, I feel like they're pretty similar, but at least local SEO, you're taking more of a geo type approach. So you're speaking more about your specific geography and kind of educating people about your community or speaking to specific things. You're also generally targeting more local type links, so that could be a lot of citations or like I can't think of the word right now. Chamber of Commerce, things like that, or local promotions. So generally it tends to be that, but that's pretty synonymous with similar with general SEO, but you're kind of taking a more specific niche or things like that. So I definitely say they're pretty similar, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I apologize for the general questions, but I feel like
No,
you're
you're
just kind of like the general expert.
You're-
Can you explain like what the difference between something like citations and backlinks are? And is there a difference?
I mean, citations, so some citations do have backlinks. So at least what I've known is a citation is a name, address, phone number. Sometimes they can include backlinks, whereas like a backlink can be a citation, but then it can also be a name, address, phone number. So, but essentially it's just a reference where basically they use a hyperlink back to your website and Google crawls that and essentially you get a vote of confidence or I guess, credit in Google's eyes as far as that being an authoritative site if it's a quality backlink.
Okay, cool. And how many citations do you need? Like, are you cool just being on all the big sites, or should you get on all of them? And do you have to keep adding citations every month?
I mean, me personally, whenever I've done it, I'll usually submit to the major aggregators, and beyond that, usually I think Yelp, Yellow Pages, some of the other big ones like Merchant Circle, but I tend not to hyper focus on them because I feel like unless they don't really give like I think they're more for trust rather than ranking. I think it'll definitely help your ranking, but I think you can get more benefit trying to get, I guess, higher slash niche relevant backlinks and just general things like that. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I see it the same way where citations are more so just establishing your brand and entity on Google. So Google can just clearly see, hey, 100 places online all have the exact information and saying this is who you are. And same thing with the social media platforms. You should have a profile on each of those for your business. So really, I don't know. People kind of think of it the wrong way, and they don't think of Google so much as like Google identifying entities. But I think that is the right way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as SEOs or marketers, we tend to hyper focus on things that may not have the biggest impact. And I think it goes back to like having an 80-20 SEO where it's like backlinks and content are going to drive you most of the way. And if you have a citation with a backlink, great. But you try to do those and now your GMB and just your overall relevance and just your categories, and that'll take you most of the way.
Definitely. Something I definitely wanted to touch on. So I told you I just watched a podcast you were on, and you said that you spent 20 to 25 hours doing an SEO audit for a company. Now, that kind of like blew my mind. I've heard people do like 10, maybe 15-hour audits. But can you tell me, like, I don't know, as short as possible, but like what goes into a 20 to 25-hour audit?
Yeah, so I mean, this was pretty beastly, but basically this client, they specialize in both renting and selling storage containers and things like that. So essentially, I went through their entire website. I tend to focus on each of the content template types, but then also look to audit basically all the major pages. So I like to look at like the title tag, the headers, how's the internal linking, how is their citations, how are the reviews, are they optimized there, and looking at if there's a blog content strategy, how's that working, and essentially also optimizing and looking at their backlink strategy and seeing like if things are natural. And yeah, I mean, also looking at the GMB too, because I looked at a lot of GMBs where like they could have more categories, they're not responding in the reviews, or they don't have services set up. So I mean, with local it could be a bit longer just because there's more things at play. But yeah, I mean, that client, they did implement the audit and they had pretty good success. So, yeah, I mean, was kind of it. That's kind of putting in like very basic terms, but like any audit, you're looking for basically Google crawl this site. Can we make it as easy as possible for them to do that? Can we optimize the content? Are we targeting the right keywords on the page? Is it in the right place? Is it semantically friendly? Are we using, for example, like maybe titles, bulleted list, unbulleted list, name national NLP, I can't think of it right now, but basically having that set up and just making it as easy as possible for Google, because as smart as Google is still, I think there's a lot of nuances, and obviously we've seen that Google doesn't always get things right, so you want to make it as easy as possible for them. And that's also part of my audit too, where it's like I want to make sure, like, at least with this client, a lot of their pages were, I think, below like 3 clicks from the domain, from the beginning of the domain. So essentially I recommended like a HTML sitemap so we could put all like the important pages on there and kind of like shorten the distance between like the root and the other pages.
Interesting. Okay. So in like a super heavy audit like that, what was like the bulk of it? Like, is it mostly technical stuff? It sounds like it's more technical.
It's honestly a mix. I mean, I've also had clients just come to me and they only want like a technical audit. So, but I mean, this one wasn't local, but I worked with a client that basically was a men's health client in Australia, and essentially they had been basically dropping over multiple core updates and algo updates, and a lot of things I noticed was like there's some technical issues, but there was also the content wasn't too well optimized. So I recently checked in with them and they implemented my strategies, and they saw massive, pretty large improvements. So I mean, it really just depends on the client, but I've been always someone where it's like I like to use a variety of both like the tools and both the on page manually looking at certain pages because I feel like these massive tools don't always get things right or they may miss things. So I've you've probably heard it too, where it's like these SEO agencies will be like, I did an audit for a client and charged $400, and it's like an SEMrush automatic
Yeah.
report. It's like, oh my god, this is like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I hope companies don't fall for that, where a lot of software companies like SEMrush can actually give like a pretty detailed SEO audit that it's just the data. I
Yeah.
mean, they can just scrape from what they see. So I think something important to look for in an audit, like as a local business owner, is that there shouldn't only be like the metrics, which is like the data, but there also needs to be the analysis. So maybe
exactly.
you have a section of analysis on the Google Doc, or you have like a video explainer. That's usually what I like to do because, I mean, the data is just data that they don't really know how to comprehend that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll usually do that, and then I'll end the audit with basically like the impact of each thing and prioritize it so they have an action plan to basically know what to do. And then on the top, I'll do like an executive summary because I'm not expecting them to read like everything over, but what matters to them most is making money. So it's like, how can you show which things are going to make them the most money and show the impact of each? So I try to focus on those things.
Awesome. And can you dive into your SEO audit process a little bit more? So is there like something you always start with? Is there something you always end with? Is it like 5 steps, or there's like, a 100-point checklist? Just tell me more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have like a template, but essentially I'm looking through each page template. Well, let me just, I won't share my screen, but I'll just look at it so I can give you, I want to make sure I
Yeah.
accurately describe it. But essentially, um, I'll go through each page template. I'm looking at like big things like the title tag, the URL structure, meta description. How are the header tags? Are they optimized? I don't tend to hyper focus it on anymore, but I'll look to see, make sure content isn't super optimized because I feel at this point like you're going to more likely get hit by an over optimization penalty rather than being under optimized. So that'll be things to look at. Are they contextual internal linking to other like product pages? Are there opportunities there? Are the canonical tags set up? Schema, JavaScript. Uh, I'll go through their search console. I really try to look at the page indexing, things like there, making sure Google is essentially, like I mentioned before, I don't like to see Google wasting their time on certain areas that may be duplicative or just not a good use of the time. So making sure they're not crawling like duplicates of pages or preventing it when possible. And then the robots.txt, making sure they're allowing correct directories and they're not blocking anything bad, and also making sure the XML sitemap is set up correctly, has all the URLs in there, making sure URLs that are say like a 404 or a 301 aren't in there because that tends to like just waste Google's time and they're not like the default URLs. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty high level. Then I also like will look through Screaming Frog and see if it picks up anything there. And then I also, like I mentioned, I like to look at crawl depth too. So generally, depending on the size of the site, I try to make sure the bulk of the pages are on 3 to 4 levels from the root domain, just because Google tends to find those pages more valuable. Anything below that, I mean, it's still valuable, but it doesn't tend to be crawled as much, and Google doesn't find it as useful. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's a super good nugget there, making sure the crawl depth is correct. I've seen some companies that, some of the top pages that they want to rank, it might be 5 clicks, which I guess it's kind of hard to explain, but essentially that page should be like either linked from the homepage or the homepage links to another page and then that page links to that page. Usually, I think it's kind of a general consensus that your top pages want to be like either a 2 or 3 like click or crawl depth, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. And like, if possible, ideally you put all those pages in the header and footer. Obviously, I try not to go crazy. I mean, sites like Amazon can get away with it, but they have like 100 links in their footer, but it's because they're linking out to all their sites. And
Yeah,
Google's definitely not going to penalize them because that would be the end of the world. But I mean,
definitely.
yeah, an extreme
I've got
example.
I've got a pretty niche question for you. So I've heard some different things about optimizing title tags in particular, and I want to get your opinion. So I'll give you like a
Yeah.
specific scenario. Let's say a company is making a page for like a location page for like pest control Chicago, and let's say I'd say usually pretty typically companies will do like pest control in Chicago, and then it'll be a dash, and then it'll be the company name. Is that good, or should they do more to the company page? I've seen some companies, maybe they do pest control Chicago dash exterminator Chicago, then maybe even pest control near me, and then dash the company name. Like what goes into a good title tag essentially?
I mean, it's a variety of things, but essentially, at least how I've always done it is trying to get those target keywords as close as possible to like the left side of the title tag because those tend to carry more weight. And then, if possible, ideally make it click worthy. So, I don't know, something like pest control Chicago, get a free quote dash like the brand name. So I think that one could stick out more. But I mean, ideally, you want to do your keyword research, and I don't like to copy what others are doing, but sometimes I might get inspiration. So I use that, and I'm also seeing sometimes like which keywords is Google like bolding maybe in the text and possibly include those in the title tag. But I mean, I would say most of those, and just making sure people actually want to click on it, and tend to like not go crazy hard. And but I mean, because I know sometimes like Google will rewrite title tags even if you have it under the 70 characters or whatever. So just try to make it click worthy, and just make sure you're targeting keywords, and also there is you want to get people to click it. So just like incentivizing or having a CTA or a power type word in there to get people to click.
Yeah. And can you over optimize it? Because I've seen some people say that they're putting like, I don't know, 4 different terms in it, and it's not even showing, but it's still actually helping their rankings.
I mean, it's definitely possible. I mean, I think in that case, as long as they're pretty similar, I think it should be fine. But I would probably, me personally, I'd probably stick to like 1 or 2, unless it's like super relevant. But I think anything after that, and you're kind of diluting, what I would do is maybe put those other 2 keywords possibly in the H1 or some of those other header tags, because at least then you'll still get the value. Because at least in my eyes, I've always thought the title tag is one of the most influential ranking factors, and then I've always thought the H1 was like second most. Obviously, I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but I felt like you're going to get the most value out of those. So try to get like your, I guess, your keywords you most want to rank for in there, and then focus on like the secondary or tertiary and like those H2s and lower headers down the page.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think title tag is incredibly important as well. And that's why, I mean, it sounds like so nuanced to maybe someone who isn't familiar with SEO, but that's like one of those 80/20 things. That's like a super easy dial that you can switch that can help SEO a ton. And by the way, I really like that point about making the title actually click-worthy. I feel like most people are way too much optimizing for SEO and Google and the search engines, where really part of ranking and what Google wants to promote is pages that are getting clicked on. So that is the title and the meta description. So I mean, you can have the most SEO title in the world, but if people don't like it, then I mean they're going to click on the one that they like, and then that one's going to get boosted up, and that was proven in Google's leak. So I really like that aspect as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know in the past I've heard people mention basically like get the page ranking and then change the title tag. But personally, I like to just hit it as hard as out of the box as possible. And I think just given how competitive things are with the AI overviews and LLMs now, you want to use every advantage you can. So it's like get the title tag, make it click worthy. I know Google rewrites meta descriptions a lot too. So if you have a small site, it's like kind of just describe the page and get a CTA and just use every aspect of I guess, ranking space you have to rank and try to get those clicks.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I wanted to dive into meta descriptions a little bit. What is like the optimal meta description, and like how do you make sure that people click on that website page?
How I've always done it is basically I generally try to describe what someone would expect to see on that page as well as what is on the page, and then usually end it with a call to action like see more, get started now, or like call and get a quote, or maybe if you're like local you could even put like a phone number in the meta description. I've done that before and I think that works well. So it really just depends on your client. Like in e-commerce, those tend to be automatically generated, so it'd be more just like it usually ends up listing the product description. But with these smaller sites, you definitely have more to work with because there tend to be less pages and there's going to be more unique content.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So you are currently the senior technical SEO
Yes.
manager at, I believe it's Hub International,
Yep.
which is $1 billion company. Can you tell me what that's like to be doing SEO for such a big company?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love it a lot. I mean, I think what I enjoy most about technical SEO, there's never a dull moment and you're always looking to learn more. But I think at least my day to day really depends. I do a lot of meeting with developers and kind of educating them on why we're doing things and crafting JIRA tickets, which essentially communicates like what the ticket is, the assessment, the acceptance state. I've also helped out with like we've had issues where like one of the not developers but our IT or support basically Cloudflare blocked our entire site, so we couldn't get crawl for 2 weeks. So I've had to like fix issues there. I'll also do anything from like creating internal links. We do a lot of that, and just I worked extensively on trying to improve page indexing issues and yeah. So I mean, it's anything from like I've also done good amount of technical audits to kind of just see where we are lapse in maybe technical SEO. So like one of the other sites I work on, which is Viewed by Hub, it was basically a single page application, so primarily JavaScript. So when I came there, at least, so I guess just to explain it, there's two things, at least there's more than two, but essentially there's this thing called client-side JavaScript, which essentially loads in the person's browser, versus server-side, which essentially loads in the server. And usually client-side Google can crawl that, but it basically makes some more work. So I essentially had it so like all like the HTML text loads server side, and we saw some improvements there as far as Google better crawling the website. So yeah, I mean it's honestly a variety. I also help a lot with some monthly reports and kind of storytelling and educating my bosses why we are doing things and the benefits. So I think at least when people outside of SEO think of SEO, they just think of ranking a website. But when you get into enterprise, you also have to be very good at communicating why you're doing things, getting buy-in, selling your ideas, and just educating people. So it's a mix of things. But I definitely enjoy it a lot more than at least when I was. I mean, I do agency now, but when I was working for an agency, I felt like it was like very fast-paced. I learned a good amount, but I just was not like a fan of just how it works.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain like the difference between doing SEO for like an enterprise or S&P 500 company versus, or Fortune 500, whatever,
Sure.
Versus a smaller company that might be doing just like $1 million a year?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll start with the enterprise. Enterprise is a lot more moving parts. So, like I mentioned, you have to make sure all the stakeholders are on board. You need to educate everyone. You really need to document the process of why you're doing things. At least a lot of me, at least the technical stuff, I have to go through and create JIRA tickets and basically have them implement all the work there. I also do have access to a CMS called Sitecor, so I'm able to basically make updates to the title tags, meta descriptions, internal links. So I would just say it tends to be a bit more longer to get things approved, and things tend to move a lot slower versus say it's like a local company where it's like you're only really educating the owner, and sometimes maybe they have a few employees. So, but I mean, they also tend to be a bit harder too on the budget. So you kind of need to be a bit more creative at times with what you get. But for the most part, they tend to focus more on like I think sales and just the overall improvements there. So I've always felt like as long as you can educate them why you're doing things and show them like you spend this amount of money, this is the return you got on that. So there's definitely some similar things, but it also moves a lot faster. And I think a lot of them have an expectation where it's like, I want to make money now. So I think a lot, it goes back to a lot of like the storytelling and educating them from the first call and why you're doing things, and just um, being able to like communicate with them. And a lot of them, I'll try to do multiple meetings a month and be able to communicate and deliver monthly reports. So I think they definitely both have like their pros and cons, but I would definitely say I like enterprise a bit more because at least I'm able to work with people that tend to understand what we're doing a bit more versus a business owner that is just trying to sell money. Some of them have like SEO backgrounds. A lot of people, they don't understand SEO a ton. So
yeah. No, I completely agree. I really don't take on any clients that are making under $1 million a year now, just because they are just so leads. It has to be direct ROI, where it's like, dude, like the results that we're really going to see are going to come like 6 to 12 months down the line.
Yeah.
So if you need leads in the next month or two, like honestly, I don't think this makes sense. Like I'll give you some advice, push you in the right direction, and maybe you can make some more money that way, and then you have money to work with me.
That's smart.
But you have to understand that it's a long-term play. And usually, like, kind of what I wanted to ask you is, smaller companies, they'll usually start by hiring an agency. Maybe it's a smaller agency, then they hire a better one.
Yeah.
Have you seen that there's like a particular point where you should switch from agency to in-house? Like, is there a certain number of like, 20 million a year, $50 million a year, where it makes sense to have an in-house team?
Good question. I honestly think it's going to depend on how much money they're making, because I mean, if you're hiring an in-house team, if I'm just kind of think, but if I'm hiring like one mid-level SEO, I'm probably paying 50 to 60 a year, whereas you could probably pay a freelancer small business, like a small agency, probably get for a little less. So I think it just really depends on how big your site is and your budget. But yeah, I don't know if there's like a magic number, but definitely you want to be making a sizable amount where there's enough work for someone to be working like 40 hours a week. Whereas like sometimes with agencies, you don't have a ton of work, so they only work a certain amount of hours a month, and you do get like a good value on that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something that I've kind of been diving into and learning more about, is when is that right transition period? Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to help out my clients and customers. And usually, I think the natural progression is that I help them so much that they actually don't need me to do the work, and they have someone in-house, but then maybe I come in and consult instead. So like, are you doing any consulting at the moment?
Yeah, on occasion, like I mentioned, I do freelance on the side, so I have a retainer client now, and then I've also done some one-off work where I've done some work with a woman in the educational space. I've also done local audits, but for the most part, they tend to be one-off engagements or mostly retainers. So it's honestly a mix of things. Really just depends on what the client wants. Obviously, some of these people don't have crazy budgets, so like sometimes I'll do an audit and hand it off to them and they've done the work. So yeah, it really just depends on what their needs are, what their budget is, and just kind of figure it out from there.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, no, I was kind of personally interested because I've been getting more into consulting. I'm not sure if maybe that's the route, and I just do high level consulting for bigger companies instead of, now I have to like scrape by with retainers for smaller companies, and they're always complaining and churning. It's it's kind of a nightmare in the agency space.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, I think what's definitely been helpful for me, like going back to like creating that personal brand, and I feel like I've gotten a lot more. Obviously, they're not always high quality, but I've gotten sometimes some quality leads from Upwork where I've signed a few good retainers from there. So you kind of just need to like see what works for you and have a few strategies and just kind of just keep improving, get those case studies, and just work on your sales skills, which I need to work on myself. But yeah, those things definitely help.
No, definitely me too. I had a pretty brutal sales call the other day. I was just like, dang, I am not as good at sales as I thought.
Yeah.
Which, is all something us all business owners need to work on. I feel like that's just
agreed.
It's a fundamental skill that we need to have in place. So yeah, cool. I want to talk also about the future of SEO and how AI plays into it and everything. So can you walk me through, first off, like what's been happening the past year or two in regards to new things in SEO and AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty crazy year. I mean, actually did a slide on this for work, but recently was basically the introduction of Search GPT. So more people have been using that, but before that, a lot of people were using OpenAI and ChatGPT to essentially find information there. Google basically rolled out AI overviews, which are essentially large language learning model, which kind of just tries to predict or answer questions. It's almost like featured snippets on steroids, but yeah, those two things have kind of created a lot of parity, and I think I'm trying to think what else. I mean, those things, and I think just Search GPT or Chat GPT has also started to take more of the market share too. Last I heard, it was, I think, maybe more than 5%, which is pretty impressive because Bing hasn't even gotten close to there. So there's that. There's Perplexity, a few other ones that are pretty big now. Not AI related, but it seems like these days any query you search for, it's like Reddit or like Quora now, and that's super competitive. There's also been a lot of new SERP features where it may take more clicks maybe from a local business owner. So yeah, I mean, it's just been a lot of changes and just core updates, and then I also feel like a lot of the quality isn't great. So I think, I mean, it's going to depend on your niche, but I know more and more people are using like TikTok or Instagram for certain searches. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of craziness, and just people say SEO's dead, but I joke, and I think it's only dead if you can't change or pivot your strategy and continue to rank. I think local, for the most part, has been pretty unscathed because I think a lot of the clicks do go to the map clicks still and some of those organic links, which it seems Google hasn't really had AI overview for that type of stuff there. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I recently said on a podcast that SEO isn't dead, it's just evolving. And, like you said, it's all different kinds of platforms, and we kind of have to adapt to it. And also something that I'd like to mention is a lot of people think that, maybe ChatGPT might take over search or other things like Perplexity. And specifically in the local sphere, I think we're particularly safe, not only because usually people look for local businesses on Google, but it's also older people that are, like, if it's home service local businesses, then it's homeowners searching for it. So the older people typically are going to look on Google more than ChatGPT. So I think that's also going to be a later adoption as well, which is why I'm still super bullish in local SEO.
Yeah, I think local SEO is definitely a great space to be in for SEO, for sure.
Awesome. And where do you see, again, SEO and AI, all of these things going the next few years?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the platforms like ChatGPT are definitely going to continue to take up more market share. I mean, I've looked at like how they do local results maybe a few weeks back, and I wasn't too impressed, but it's still like pretty early as far as like the technology. So I can see it improving there, but I can just see more and more queries essentially returning people won't click. So like people will maybe search some information and then they'll see like something. So I could see definitely see clicks going down, but conversions and that stuff going up because people will still need to go to your site to either call you or submit like a lead. So I can definitely see traffic kind of being taken there. But I think another thing I haven't touched on is kind of diversifying your strategy. So it's like being active on like Facebook and like Google My Business, creating posts there and like creating a strong brand so people know who you are. So that maybe that's like radio or some small TV ads to kind of improve that like branded search there. And I mean, even you could create an email list. I don't know if it's like a ton of use for local business there, but it's another way to kind of keep traffic when and just not be reliant on Google. And if there are like highly talked about forums or discussion forums for your niche, maybe try to be there and answer questions when possible. So I think what's going to really win out is someone that's going to have a diversified strategy and has a brand that people have heard of. And that's, I think, where Google's always been is they want to essentially reward higher brands because I think, I don't know if it's a patent or someone said it, but essentially Google feels more comfortable basically recommending brands higher because they have more trust versus like some no-name site which no one's never heard of and maybe there's some liability on their parts and people end up going back to the search result and then they like drop that site down. So
Yeah.
variety of things.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I think that's super legitimate, and I'm a total advocate for social media. I think ideally you're on every single social platform. You've got a good amount of followers because again, all of those followers, all that engagement, those are all votes towards your company. So I mean, which company seems more authoritative? In, by the way, your customers' eyes and Google's eyes. Which one seems more authoritative? The one that has 10,000 followers on every platform and has it set up and it's all the exact same information, the same logo, the same username, the same name, the same bio, versus a company that's maybe on 2 platforms. They have 100 followers on each. They don't post ever. They haven't done anything. It's pretty clear which one seems more authoritative. And, you know, as we get into the future, that's something I'm also super bullish on is social media. That the younger generation is using social media to search a ton. So ideally, when someone searches like Pest Control Chicago, you're ready to show up on TikTok. You're ready to show up on Instagram. You're ready to show up on YouTube. I totally believe in that as well.
Yeah, great to see you feel the same way.
Yeah, awesome. What do you feel about YouTube SEO? Like, do you think that's super important that people should really be pushing on that? Because that's obviously that's the second most powerful search engine.
I would definitely focus on it because it's going to be a lot less competitive. Obviously, I mean, with local, you're only competing against your local geo, but I think there are certain searches that people may be looking for that you could show up for, mostly how to do such and such, and maybe you're there and they see you. But it also will build, get people back to your website as well. So I think if it's like, it kind of educates your customers too. I know my client right now, they actually wanted to start creating YouTube videos around basically installing some of their products to kind of educate customers because people are searching how to install certain things. So I think it's definitely, if there's people searching around stuff that's relevant to you and it makes sense, then yeah, definitely. Because it's still a pretty large search engine and it's definitely, depending on your geo, could be less competitive. And I think also Google is tending to start to return more rich results beyond just text. So I think that there could be some opportunities there.
Cool. And what do you think, like, is this even possible to optimize for the AI results? I've seen some people talk about this of, optimizing, I don't know, how you do certain ways of linking or how you do stuff on your website to then show up on ChatGPT when someone searches up, like, top companies in my area.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a good amount, but essentially it seems like you kind of need to see where they're getting the references for that specific search, and basically you want to appear in there. And I've read basically you want to appear as like high as possible in Bing. Trying to think what else. I've also mentioned like using citations and just quoting people, but essentially the easiest thing you're going to do is try to rank highly on the first page, and that's going to carry you most of the way. I think we're still learning the exact stuff, but I mean, like I mentioned, I've heard anyone from saying like get citations or list numbers or quote people. So I think no one really knows exactly, but I mean, like I've asked ChatGPT before, and it's not always 100% accurate, but like it seems like those referential searches are super important. So, um, like any major publications, but essentially you kind of see where your competitors are showing up, and you kind of want to show up there too.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of in between on this because
Yep.
I really don't fully believe in at least doing like local searches on ChatGPT right now.
Yeah.
I believe they're still pulling from Apple Maps data, which is just kind of weird. They should be pulling from Google,
That makes sense.
because obviously the Google business profiles that's everything regarding local businesses. And also I've seen on searches that they don't have the proper address for you, so you might search
Yes.
again like pest control Chicago, and it's showing that you're like over here, but you're actually here. So I don't think the technology is there yet. I think it will be there, but again, I think this is going to be a super late adaptation because it's homeowners that are older and people are just used to it. But
Yeah.
like even me, I'm a younger guy, but when I think of searching for a local business, like a local restaurant, I go to Google.
Me too. Yeah. I feel
Yeah,
the same. I guess we're
it's
boomers.
instinctive. Yeah, yeah. So cool. One of the last things I wanted to touch on is the SEO tools that you use. So I saw in particular, again, on that podcast, that you have a ton of Chrome extensions. You've got a ton of
Yes.
kind of nuanced tools that you use. Can you walk me through some of your top tools that you use for SEO?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely use a variety, but I guess ones I use daily are I use Search Console a ton, so I like to check that daily. Screaming Frog I use as well, so just using that for crawls. Sitebulb. I've recently started using the SEO Stack by Daniel Foley Carter, which is basically it's like Search Console on steroids. You get some crazy data in there, like query count. So that's been like actually really helpful for me because it's been able to analyze some data and kind of show you more information in Search Console. I also heavily use the SEO Pro extension, a few JavaScript extensions. I think the web developer extension, the robots exclusion checker, which essentially will show you basically if a page is blocked by uh, the robots.txt, meta directives, things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, those are the big ones I use. At least those are the only ones I can think of. But yeah, I mean, I
What
think
was that one? Sitebulb? I don't think I've heard of that.
yeah, Siteball. Yeah, it's just another SEO crawler. And then I also use a good amount to Chat GPT. So I've used that to kind of help sometimes rewriting schema or making things more NLP friendly, or I've used it for like competitive research and like content outline. So yeah, I mean, I definitely use that, and I've also shared videos where basically I've had it look at a screenshot and kind of give me like a high level overview and things like that, or it's done like Python and made things like more easier for me to use. So I mean, I think tools are important, but at the end of the day, you're only as good as the tool you use, so you need to be able to use your brain and put in the right inputs.
Definitely. And are you a SEMrush or Ahrefs guy?
I am a SEMrush guy.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I love SEMrush.
Yeah,
I,
it's a
I used to
solid
be
tool.
Ahrefs, but or whatever, Ahrefs, but SEMrush just has so many tools. It's aesthetically a little bit better. I like some of the things it does with authority score.
Yep.
Are there
Agreed.
any reasons why you use it over something like Ahrefs?
Definitely more for the authority score, and I think I also like just how it has a lot more tools, and
Mm-hmm.
they continue to like add on and just I've always felt like the customer service is pretty solid too.
Yeah, definitely. And you've mentioned Google Search Console several times. For people that maybe aren't familiar, can you tell them like exactly what it is?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, it's Google's way of kind of showing you how your website is doing in both technically and maybe ranking wise. So it'll show you kind of how many search clicks impressions you have over a designated time. It'll show you how you're showing up in rich snippets, different page indexing possibly issues, how Google's crawling your site, crawl stats. It'll show you how they're seeing your robots.txt, if they can read your XML sitemap. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, those are like at least the major ones that I can think of.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but when you go into Search Console, like let's say potentially you take on a new client, what are you looking at first?
Yeah, I mean, usually definitely looking, I like to kind of extrapolate or look at the last 60 months of traffic, seeing if there's kind of any things that may have happened, like big drop offs or things that could be holding it back, essentially. And then I'll kind of look at the page indexing issues, seeing if there's any major things that could be possibly holding it back. I've definitely ran into some clients where maybe they're blocking certain things they should have or things they should be blocking. Also looking at the URL stats, making sure Google hasn't had any issues like reaching the robots.txt or any DNS issues or things like that. I try to look in the page indexing URL stats, so pretty much daily.
Cool. Can you tell me more about robots.txt? I feel like most people don't talk about it. Can you kind of just run me through what that is?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, it's a file on your root that it basically tells Google which files or which pages or directories of the site you want them to crawl versus don't crawl. I mean, a lot of sites, for the most part, smaller sites don't have a ton of that to worry about because usually most of them are not crazy. But when you tend to get on these bigger sites like e-commerce sites, you want to definitely be careful because oftentimes you'll have maybe filters or things like that that Google's crawling. You don't want them to crawl, so you may want to block things there. I also will put the XML sitemaps in there too, just because it kind of makes it easier for Google there as well. But essentially, it's just a file where basically communicates what you want crawled. Because if you don't have it in there, Google will just crawl your whole site. And technically, if you have like a massive site, it's not going to be of use because it may use up crawl budget and other fun stuff like that. So you need to be smart how you set it up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was a great explanation. And relating to tools, what about WordPress plugins? So I'm assuming you use WordPress for most of the sites you've worked on. What plugins should you be using on WordPress?
Most of the ones I use, at least my go-to, I use an SEO plugin, so I'll use Rank Math or All-in-One SEO. I've also used a good amount of like caching plugins, but I try to tend to not to go super heavy on the plugins just because the more you have, they could kind of slow the site down. So, I mean, like I mentioned, I'll use those ones and just anything I can think of that's going to make the site faster, or maybe like I think there's a plugin to use for like duplicate post, but I tend not to use a ton of them. Obviously, if you could do the changes in the code itself, it's going to be more beneficial.
Okay, cool. And I guess somewhat relating to that, but I'm just curious, what do people need to do on the site maintenance-wise? So I've kind of gotten this question a lot, where like, what actually goes into SEO maintenance? Do they need to be checking every page every single week? Do they just need to be going into an SEO tool? Like, what do you do on a recurring basis to maintain a website?
I tend to look at Search Console pretty much daily/weekly at a time, just making sure there's no new page indexing possible issues and making sure Google's still able to crawl like the robots.txt and XML sitemap. And I think every few months I tend to run like a screaming frog crawl just to make sure there's no other issues that have kind of appeared. But I mean, if if it's not a massive site, you tend to not have to worry about a ton, but you also want to make sure there's no issues running into hosting. Sometimes I've ran into where people have a crappy host and the site goes down or they have issues. So you really just want to be on top of things and just make sure there's no like rules or things that have changed to keep the site in place.
Awesome. Last thing I want to cover is core web vitals.
Yes.
So people might not be familiar, but essentially you can search up page speed insights, and you can see the page speed on your website. You can see some other things like, SEO and how your site is performing overall. Can you tell me how important are core web vitals to a website?
I actually had a post about that last week, I think. But essentially, I think, at least I've worked with some small business owners in the past where they've hyper focused on them and been like, you have to have a perfect score. And honestly, like, if your website loads like 3 seconds or less on desktop, and I think maybe 3 to 4 seconds on mobile, that's fine. A lot of the metrics they have there, they've even come out and said that they're not major ranking factors. So I wouldn't tend to hyper focus on if you have poor or need URLs that need improvement, just to get a general scope of how fast the site is on both mobile and desktop, especially too, because like if you're in a local area, you're only going to really care about searches in that specific area versus say like someone in China is searching for my business in Boston. It's like, okay, we don't care how fast their page speed is. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I think, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, definitely having it as fast as possible. So using a CDN, Cloudflare is pretty solid there. So just try to make sure it's as fast as possible, but not to hyper focus over a few milliseconds, because you're gonna likely get better returns improving the content or getting more backlinks, for example.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm a big advocate for Cloudflare as well. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. And do you think people can just get away with using the free plan, or should they use the $20 a month or something more?
I mean, I haven't compared the paid version to the free, but I mean, I think free for most should be fine, especially a lot of like local businesses are going to be smaller websites. I think if you're getting like a larger website, you probably want to use it, but I think the free plan is fine for most.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, I learned a ton from you this podcast. I think it was a great show. And where can people find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn if you Google my name, Peter Rota. I'm also on Upwork too. And feel free to visit my website, peterrotaseo.com, if you want SEO help or local stuff there, or just any SEO at all. But yeah, I really appreciated chatting with you, and thanks again for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Yeah, so I'll link all those in the description. And I know you're active on LinkedIn, Facebook, any other platforms?
Mostly those two. I mean, I post on Instagram, but it's not like SEO related usually. So.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll link Facebook and LinkedIn. Yep. And cool, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I think it was a great show. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye, Peter.
Bye.